Now, on the show a couple of times, we've had a wonderful historian. The lady is the Dublin City Council historian in residence, and she's been on our show a couple of times before, once talking about the history of the South Circular Road, which goes back to the 1700s, another time talking about the Dolphins Barn area on the eve of World War I. So she's a local historian and always brings out the most interesting stories from that time. And I asked if she might like to come back in and talk to us maybe about Jonathan Swift. And it just so happens she's studying the River Poddle at the moment. The River Poddle. Who would have known that there was something there to study? And there's a strange connection between the River Poddle and Jonathan Swift, and she's going to come and tell us about it. Her name is Cathy Scuffil. Thanks. Welcome.
Hello, Gerry. How are you doing?
I'm good. I have to start by saying, when Cathy's been on before, the last time she was on, it was in Rascal's Brewery, you know, and people loved you, right? They just love you. And people said to me afterwards, that's a good show. You know, I said, what did you like about it? And they said, the history one, you know. And I thought that was just one person. There were about 3 different people said, yeah, the history one. So that's what you'll be known as from now on, right? The history one.
That's me, yeah. All the time.
So there's a connection between, tell us about the River Poddle for a start, and then explain to us what's the connection between the River Poddle and Jonathan Swift.
Okay, so many people would have come in tonight in past St. Patrick's Close. So where the choir school is today, on a Malton painting from 1790s, which is sort of the era that we're talking about. At one time, on the wall, just there, was a street name, and the street name was Cross Poddle. So that was a crossing point for the River Poddle, where you could get over from one side, from the Liberties, over towards the Cathedral. And of course, the Cathedral itself, to give it its proper name, is St. Patrick's in Insula. So that means St. Patrick's on the island. So it's actually built on an island in the River Poddle.
So a long time ago, the River Poddle would have flown both sides of the... Mm-hmm. And where's the River Poddle now then?
Well, the River Poddle's still around here. It's under the ground. In fact, like all the history of the Liberties, it's pretty much just under your feet. So when they were putting in the new road outside, we actually could see the river flowing down just below the surface. It's really not that far away.
Down from, I presume, the Dublin Mountains?
Yeah, coming down from Harold's Cross direction. So
into Liffey, is it?
Yeah, it is a tributary of the Liffey.
Right.
Yeah.
And then... what happened then with Dr. Swift?
Well, you see, the Poddle is a really it's a really annoyed river at times. You know, it lets us know it's there, so it goes into a big flood every occasionally. So it has flooded this cathedral, and on one occasion when it flooded, sort of upfloated a few things from down below, including Jonathan Swift and a lady called Stella.
So they're buried under the floorboards, mm-hmm. and the river flooded and their bodies came up?
Pretty much, yeah. So they were discovered that way. They were all cleared out afterwards in the big clean-up after the flood.
And what did they do then? Did they just bury them again or what?
No, the 2 skulls went on tour. So Dublin is great, you know, so they knowing that it was the head of Jonathan Swift, it was one of those things that actually was brought around the city, put on tour, shown to different people. Different people started examining it and discovering things about him that probably explained his personality and the troubles that he had in his life.
They could tell all that from a skull?
Yeah, pretty much. And the person who did it was Oscar Wilde's father, because he was an expert on hearing and sight. So they were things that were taken into consideration.
And so what did they discover?
They discovered a loose bone in his ear, in Jonathan Swift's ear, which indicates that he had a disease called Meniere's disease. And that explains why he would have been dizzy at times or appeared giddy, you know, an unusual gait, maybe losing his balance.
Like vertigo,
yeah, it's pretty much that. And all of the things that they attributed to him as being maybe part of, say, insanity or, you know, that he didn't seem to be himself was a caused by the loose bone in his ear. We only discovered that after we floated up when the Poddle flooded the cathedral.
And deafness, I presume, was that part of it?
That was another part of it,
right,
deafness.
Right.
Yeah.
So they were handing around his skull, and tell us then about Stella, the other skull.
There was a lady buried beside him, and so Stella's skull went on tour as well. So I think they have reconstructed it for here. Stella's skull, I think, was reconstructed for Marshall's Library, and Jonathan Swift's was reconstructed for here.
And tell us who Stella was.
Now, Stella is one of the ladies associated with Jonathan Swift. Her real name was Esther Johnston, but he gave her the name Stella. So it was like a pet name. He met her when she was about 9. He was her tutor. He met her in England. And although he was very fond of her when she was young, there was nothing unusual about that. He was her tutor. It was a tutor-child relationship. It was only in later years that he met her again, and at that point then he was quite taken by her and considered her quite, a nice lady, somebody he wanted to get to know better. So
is that a very polite way of saying they're doing the business?
I'm not going to go there, Gerry. I'll leave that to your imagination.
We're going to have to rewind that part as well, Michael. So, but I mean, they were lifelong friends, weren't they?
Almost 30 years friends.
So it was a very close friendship.
A very close friendship, yes, yeah. Now, you've got to remember the time. So, she would have been with her own companion. She would have helped him out in the house, in the deanery. She was part of his world, very much part of his world. They exchanged letters and communications over the years. And eventually he publishes those letters to Stella. So he had a lot of, he was very, very fond of her, very close to her, and certainly they had a very good relationship.
But they didn't get married?
Well, now there's a big question. You see, like everything else about Swift, we can never be 100% certain of everything about him. So there is a train of thought that they may have got married. Maybe a marriage ceremony took place. It was never written down anywhere, so we haven't got any written evidence of that. But most of their close friends seem to assume they were married. So we're not 100% certain of that end of the relationship. But I put it to you this way: if you were close friends with, a gentleman who's close friends with a lady for over 30 years, there's certainly something there. You are quite right, Gerry.
And why wouldn't he marry her?
Well, this is the other question. And again, we can't prove this. We really don't know what the actual story is. It seems at some stage during the relationship, they may have discovered they were actually related. And it may have been the type of relationship that would have caused both of them maybe a lot of embarrassment if it had come out publicly. And it's certainly for his position as Dean of here and for her own sake in society. So it's implied, and certainly you come across mentioned in quite a number of places, that they were possibly uncle and niece, because both of their parentage had a big question mark over it when you research it back. So,
because there is a question mark whether Jonathan Swift, the alleged father, really was the father, right? This man died before Jonathan was born.
Yeah.
So there's an implication that the real father was a man who is related to Stella's real father. Is that it?
It's something like that, yes.
So, and that made them uncle and niece.
Yeah.
Which means that they couldn't get married.
Yes, yeah.
But did they know that?
I don't think they discovered that until a number of years had passed, until they were a number of years into this relationship.
Wow. So they couldn't admit to being uncle and niece, because that would be embarrassing.
Yeah.
And they couldn't admit to being married if they did marry, because effectively that'd be illegal, wouldn't it?
It would, pretty much so, yeah.
You can't go marrying your niece and then hold on to your job in the church.
Yeah.
I don't know the rules, but I'd imagine that's the way the rules were.
It's the norm, let's
not
say.
The norm,
not
right.
the norm, no,
right.
No, indeed.
So in that little scenario then, in walks another lady called Vanessa. Who is she?
Yeah, this is it. Now, you see, again, she's called Esther, so he seems to be gathering up Esthers in his life, so it can get very confusing. So her surname was Van Homrich. Now, her father was Lord Mayor of Dublin at one time. In fact, he's the man who gave us the chain of office that our Lord Mayors even wear today, the one with King Billy on it. That's another long story for another day. But
Don't go there.
Dublin's Lord Mayor goes around with King Billy around his neck, so we can thank Vanessa.
So the next time you see the Dublin Lord Mayor, you can kind of go up and say, King Billy. that.
Something like that, exactly. So what Jonathan Swift does, I presume, because of the confusion with the Esthers in his life, he gives her own special name, invents a name for her. So Van Humrick was her surname. He took the Van and he took the S from her Esther and made Vanessa. So the name Vanessa is invented by Jonathan Swift.
So Stella, her real name is Esther, so that's an invention. Stella is an invention of a name, and Vanessa is an invention of a name.
Yeah.
He was kind of a secretive guy, wasn't he?
He was, yeah, because you see, he suspected that people might actually be opening his letters. He suspected that his correspondence was being intercepted. It was important to him that he maintain this air of secrecy, I suppose, and privacy. And yet he was a very public figure as well. So all of that, he's image conscious, it was all part of that. So he meets Vanessa again as a young child, and he ends up being her tutor in England.
Which must, sorry to interrupt you, but it must be amazing to have one of the greatest writers in history as your tutor.
I know, I wouldn't mind that. I would love to get a great writer tutoring me at some stage, but this would have been what she had. And it kind of, I suppose, when we look at Vanessa's writings, you realise that she's quite skilled. She's, her poetry, her prose is quite nice for a lady of that time. Women wouldn't have had the education opportunities that we would have today, for example.
Right. So what was the relationship like then between Swift and Vanessa?
Now, he was a number of years in London with her, and it seemed to have got, shall we say, heated up fairly early on. And he's over there. Stella's back in Dublin. There's a bit of a distance between them. We don't have Facebook and TikTok for keeping in touch or any of that.
Reinterred to get back and forth.
Yeah, we just write the odd letter. We keep it going that way. So there is a sense that this is building up, and I think Vanessa, she felt that this may end up with a ring on her finger. She actually thought this was heading for a marriage.
But he couldn't if he was already married.
Exactly. So there's complications, and we're trying to keep our life private as well.
So Swift is back in Dublin with Stella. Yeah. He goes over to London to work in the British government. Mm-hmm. Stella stays here. Mm-hmm. He meets Vanessa over there.
Yeah. You can see it's getting complicated, can't you?
And then what happens?
Well, then eventually Swift comes back to Dublin, and then Vanessa announces that she's coming back to Ireland because she has inherited an estate. Her estate would have been Selbridge Abbey out in County Kildare, and he says to her that although she's coming over to Ireland, we will probably meet infrequently. No, I think there's a message there. So I think he's cooling off a bit, if you like, but she's not. So it's getting extremely complicated. That's the way you'd have put it on his Facebook page, I think. It's complicated.
Complicated, all right. In the pre-Facebook stage. Wow. So she's out in Selbridge Abbey. Mm-hmm. Stella's back here in Dublin. Yeah. And he's kind of...
He is kind of, yes, exactly. That's exactly what he's doing. They're still too close for him. I mean, he would much prefer if Vanessa wasn't on the island, I think, He would have preferred if she stayed in London. So eventually it erupts into a massive row because basically Vanessa gives him an ultimatum. Don't see Stella anymore, and I'm in your life. And, well, it got even more complicated.
Got even more complicated than that, right. We will hold that part until later on.
Yes.
Hold that part until later on. Very good. Is there anything else you want to tell me?
Yeah, well, it's just the way that Vanessa and Swift wrote to each other is really interesting, because they had their own set of codes. So he invented a name for her, Vanessa. The writing is really you'd want to be a bit of a detective to try and get into the root of what's going on here. So every so often you find that they would be they'd be having a conversation, if you like, in the communication, and then you get to these things like dash dash dash. So he's leaving it to your imagination as to what he's implying in the dash dash dash. He also has references to coffee. Coffee seems to be a very popular drink, and Jonathan Swift there's references in it, and she references back to him about sipping her coffee. And he hasn't had coffee since they last met, and things like that. So I'm just not saying, there might be nothing in it, and it might have been purely about having a nice afternoon coffee.
But I think you've got a mischievous mind.
I do.
When you see dash, 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 what do you see?
Well, I could start filling in the gaps.
They're a mature audience.
So I presume there's certainly a suggestion of what they would intend doing together if they were together. It's easy to write it down and not leave it unsaid, because remember, he's trying to maintain his privacy, and he's obviously trying to make sure that if the bishop intercepts this, or the archbishop intercepts this letter, all you see is dash, 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 and some references to drinking coffee, which isn't really that much, really.
Or indeed if Stella intercepted his letter.
Exactly, yes. Wow. Yeah, that's the other one. The other one.
Detective work, huh?
And a lot more to do.
A lot more to do. Will we leave it at that?
Yeah, we'll leave it.
Folks, you won the history one. Cathy Scuffil. Thank you so much.